World War II was not simply a conflict between armies. It was a collision of ideologies, ambitions, and the darkest instincts of humanity. By the early 1940s, the world stood on the edge of something irreversible. Entire nations had fallen in weeks. Democracies were collapsing. Dictators rose, promising order and greatness, while delivering fear and destruction. At the center of this storm stood Nazi Germany. Adolf Hitler did not see war as a last resort. He saw it as destiny. To him, history was written by conquest, and survival belonged only to the strong. Germany, humiliated after World War I, would rise again, not through diplomacy, but through fire. Europe fell faster than anyone had imagined possible. Poland was crushed. France collapsed. Cities that once symbolized culture and progress now echoed with marching boots. By 1941, Hitler controlled most of continental Europe. Yet in his mind, the war was far from complete. Because to Hitler, the true enemy lay in the East. The Soviet Union was vast, resource-rich, and ideologically opposed to everything Nazism stood for. Hitler believed that if Germany destroyed the USSR, no power on earth could challenge the Third Reich. This belief led to the most reckless decision of his life. In June 1941, Germany launched Operation Barbarossa, the largest invasion in human history. More than 3 million soldiers crossed into Soviet territory. At first, it seemed like another German triumph. Entire Soviet armies were encircled. Millions were captured or killed. Cities burned. Hitler was convinced victory was inevitable. But the Soviet Union did not collapse. It absorbed the blow. It retreated, regrouped, and endured. As months passed, the German advance slowed. Supply lines stretched dangerously thin. Winter loomed. Soviet resistance hardened. By 1942, Hitler faced a problem he had never truly encountered before, a war that refused to end. So he doubled down. Instead of retreating or consolidating gains, he chose escalation. His eyes turned south toward oil fields that could fuel his war machine and a city that carried enormous symbolic weight. That city was Stalingrad. Stalingrad was not the largest city in the Soviet Union. It was not the capital, but it bore Stalin's name. To Hitler, capturing Stalingrad would be more than a military victory. It would be a psychological blow, proof that even the heart of Soviet power could be broken. To Stalin, losing it was unthinkable. Orders were sent. The city would not fall, not one step back. By late summer 1942, German forces reached the outskirts of Stalingrad. Luftwaffe bombers turned the city into ruins, killing tens of thousands of civilians in days. But the destruction did not weaken resistance, it strengthened it. The ruins became weapons, collapsed buildings turned into defensive positions, rubble blocked tanks, smoke and dust neutralized air power. What followed was unlike anything seen before. This was not a battle of sweeping movements, it was a battle of inches. German soldiers fought room by room, floor by floor, sometimes hand to hand. Snipers dominated the battlefield. A single shot could stop an entire unit. At night, Soviet soldiers launched sudden counterattacks, keeping the enemy exhausted and terrified. There was no rest. There was no safety. German soldiers called it Rottenkrieg, the war of rats. They lived among corpses. They fought in sewers. They slept beside the dead. Winter arrived early and brutally. Temperatures plunged far below freezing. German uniforms were inadequate. Vehicles failed. Weapons jammed. Wounded soldiers froze before medics could reach them. Food grew scarce. Ammunition ran low. Yet Hitler refused retreat. Again and again his generals warned him. Again and again he ignored them. In November 1942, the Soviets struck back. Operation Uranus was launched. Instead of attacking the heavily defended city, Soviet forces smashed through weaker German flanks held by poorly equipped allies. Within days, the German Sixth Army was surrounded. Over 300,000 soldiers were trapped. Hitler promised rescue. It never came. Air supply failed. Planes crashed. Supplies were insufficient. Hunger became constant. Men boiled leather belts to survive. Disease spread. Hope disappeared. One by one, German positions collapsed. By January 1943, resistance was broken. On February 2nd, the last German forces surrendered. It was the first complete destruction of a German army in World War II. The myth of Nazi invincibility died in the frozen ruins of Stalingrad. The consequences were immediate and irreversible. Germany would never regain the initiative in the East. The Soviet Union began a relentless push westward that would end in Berlin. Allied nations saw that Hitler could be defeated. The balance of power shifted. Stalingrad was not just a battle, it was the moment the war changed direction, the moment the fate of the world was decided. Because from that point forward, the fall of Nazi Germany was no longer a question of if, only when. And from the frozen silence of Stalingrad, the world began to move in a new direction. News of the German surrender spread slowly at first. Nazi propaganda tried to hide the scale of the disaster, calling it a temporary setback. But the truth could not be buried. Entire divisions were gone. Experienced officers were dead or captured. Germany had lost hundreds of thousands of men it could never fully replace. More importantly, something far more dangerous to the Nazi regime had been destroyed: fear. Until Stalingrad, German soldiers believed they were unstoppable. They had marched across Europe with confidence, crushing every enemy in their path. After Stalingrad, that belief vanished. From now on, German troops would fight defensively, cautiously, always aware that defeat was possible. On the other side, the Soviet Union was transformed. Stalingrad became more than a victory. It became a symbol that sacrifice could overcome technology, that endurance could defeat aggression, that even the strongest enemy could bleed, freeze, and break. The Red Army began to change. Tactics improved, coordination increased, confidence grew, and the Soviet counteroffensive did not stop. Month after month, the Germans were pushed back. Kharkov, Kursk, Kiev, each battle drained German strength further. The Battle of Kursk, the largest tank battle in history, shattered Germany's remaining offensive power in the east. From that moment on, the direction was clear. The road led west. As the Eastern Front consumed German manpower and resources, something else was happening in the West. The Allies were watching. Britain and the United States understood that Stalingrad had created an opportunity. Germany was now fighting a war on two unstoppable fronts. The time to strike had come. Factories in America worked day and night. Ships crossed the Atlantic in endless convoys. Soldiers trained for an invasion that would decide the future of Europe. On June 6, 1944, that invasion began. D-Day. Thousands of ships appeared on the horizon of Normandy. Paratroopers dropped from the sky. Soldiers stormed beaches under machine gun fire. It was the largest amphibious assault in history, and it was only possible because Germany no longer had the strength to stop it. The best German divisions were already dead or dying in the east. Stalingrad had made Normandy possible. As Allied forces pushed inland, Germany's situation became hopeless. Cities were bombed relentlessly. Fuel shortages crippled movement. The Luftwaffe, once feared, barely existed. Hitler, isolated and delusional, still believed in miracles. He demanded attacks with imaginary armies, blamed generals, and refused reality. Meanwhile, the Red Army continued its advance, village by village, city by city, through Poland into Eastern Europe. The cost was unimaginable. Millions of Soviet soldiers died pushing toward Berlin, but the momentum could not be stopped. By early 1945, Germany was collapsing from all sides. Refugees flooded roads, food vanished, infrastructure disintegrated. And at last, the final battle arrived. Berlin. The capital of the Third Reich became a battlefield. Soviet artillery turned the city into ruins, echoing the destruction once inflicted on Stalingrad. Street fighting returned. Buildings changed hands multiple times a day. Civilians hid in basements as the world they knew ended above them. On April 30th, 1945, Adolf Hitler killed himself in his bunker. Days later, Germany surrendered. The war in Europe was over, but the world that emerged from it was forever changed. World War II did not simply end with victory or defeat. It reshaped global power in ways that still define our lives today. Europe lay in ruins. Empires collapsed. From the ashes rose two new superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union. The world split into spheres of influence. Ideology replaced open warfare. The Cold War began. Borders drawn after the war would fuel conflicts for decades. Nations rebuilt with fear of repeating the past. International institutions were created to prevent another global catastrophe, yet always under the shadow of nuclear weapons. And at the center of all these changes stood one defining moment: Stalingrad. Had Germany won that battle, the Soviet Union might have collapsed. The Eastern Front might have disappeared. Millions more soldiers could have died under Nazi occupation. Allied invasion of Europe might have been impossible. History would have taken a darker path. But it did not. Because in one ruined city, in brutal winter, through unimaginable suffering, the course of the war was reversed. Stalingrad was not just a military defeat for Germany. It was the moment the future of humanity shifted. The moment when the fate of the world was decided. And it stands as a reminder that even in humanity's darkest hours, a single moment, a single stand can change everything.